Hello everyone. Let me ask you something simple but deeply unsettling. When was the last time you touched your partner, not out of habit, not out of duty, but with presence? Think about it. Not a quick peck on the cheek before rushing to work. Not the distracted brush of hands while passing each other in the kitchen. I mean the kind of touch that says, I see you. I'm here with you. You matter to me. In so many marriages, the words may still be there. The logistics of life, the conversations about bills, children, and schedules. But the language of touch, the silent poetry of intimacy, often fades quietly into the background. And when that happens, a couple can live under the same roof, share the same bed, and still feel oceans apart. You see, intimacy is not built on the number of words exchanged. It's sustained by the quality of connection. And touch, in its simplest form, is the bridge that carries love when words fail. Touch can heal resentment, soften anger, and remind two people why they chose each other in the first place. So today we're going to explore how touch, small, intentional, everyday gestures, can save a marriage from withering into silence. Because sometimes the most powerful conversations between lovers happen without a single word. We often think that love lives in the words we speak, the promises we make, and the conversations we share late at night. And yes, words matter. They matter deeply. But let me tell you something I have witnessed over decades of working with couples. Marriages are rarely lost because two people stop talking. More often, they are lost because two people stop touching. Not in the sense of grand gestures or passionate movie scenes, but in the subtle, everyday touches that sustain intimacy. The hand on the back when passing by, the brush of fingers at the dinner table, the kiss that lingers just a second longer than necessary. Think about it. When you first fell in love, touch was everywhere. You couldn't keep your hands off each other. You held hands in the street. Your knees touched under the table. You hugged as if you never wanted to let go. It was effortless. And in those early days, that touch was not just physical. It was a message. It said, I desire you. I want you close. I am here. But as time passes, life grows heavier. Children, careers, responsibilities, exhaustion. And slowly, almost without noticing, touch disappears. Not overnight, but gradually, until one day you realize you cannot remember the last time you held each other simply for the joy of holding. And here is the paradox. Many couples still love each other. The affection is there. The loyalty is there. But the absence of touch creates a vacuum. That vacuum gets filled with distance, with silence, sometimes with resentment, and partners begin to feel unseen, even when they are sitting right next to each other. Let me ask you this. Have you ever had an argument with your partner? One of those repetitive, frustrating fights where nothing gets resolved. And afterward you sit on opposite ends of the couch, arms crossed, waiting for the other to speak first. Now imagine in that exact moment, if instead of silence, one of you simply reached out and placed a hand on the other's arm. No words. Just a gesture that says, I may be angry, I may be hurt, but I still want you close. Do you see the power in that? Touch can bypass the ego. It can soften the harshest words, and sometimes it can repair damage in a way that talking cannot. This is why intimacy without words is so vital. Because when words are stuck, when you don't know what to say, or when saying it only makes things worse, touch becomes the bridge back to connection. But to use it, you must first remember what it means. Touch is not about obligation. It is not about performance. It is about presence. Presence is everything. You can hug someone absent-mindedly while thinking about your to-do list, and it will feel empty. Or you can hug with your full body, your breath slowing down, your chest pressed against theirs, and suddenly the world pauses for a moment. That is intimacy. That is touch as a language of love. I want you to think of intimacy not as a single act, but as an atmosphere you create. For example, a man once told me that after 20 years of marriage, he realized his wife often leaned against the counter while she cooked, tired from her day. Instead of just asking, do you need help, which she usually waved off, he began walking behind her and placing his hands gently on her shoulders. Just a few seconds, no words, no agenda. She told him later that it made her feel cared for in a way she hadn't felt in years. Not because he fixed the problem, but because he entered her space with presence. This is what I want you to notice. Intimacy through touch is less about grand gestures and more about micro moments. A kiss on the forehead before leaving the house. A hand resting on the thigh while driving. Fingers brushing through hair while sitting together. These small things accumulate, and the more they happen, the more the nervous system of your partner begins to relax in your presence. Touch is, quite literally, soothing to the body. It lowers stress hormones. It creates safety, and safety is the soil in which desire can grow again. Now here is where it gets even more fascinating. Many people think desire and intimacy are opposites. They say, when we were new, it was passionate, but now it feels more like companionship. And they accept this as the natural death of passion. But the truth is, touch can reignite desire, even after years of routine, because touch reminds us that the body is alive, that closeness is still possible. Think about a couple lying in bed, each scrolling on their phones. The distance is not physical, they are side by side, but it is emotional. Now imagine one partner gently placing their phone down, rolling over, and tracing their fingers along the other's arm without saying a word. That tiny act has the power to change the entire energy in the room. Of course, for many couples, touch is no longer easy. Sometimes there has been rejection, one partner reaching out, the other pulling away. Sometimes there has been hurt, betrayal, or resentment. And so touch becomes dangerous. It feels loaded. But here is the key. You do not have to start with the grand return of passion. You start small, you rebuild. You begin with gestures that carry no pressure, no demand for reciprocity. You simply reintroduce presence through the skin. I once worked with a couple who had been married for 15 years. They loved each other, but they had not been physically affectionate for nearly 5. When I asked them to simply hold hands during one of our sessions, it felt awkward at first. Their fingers were stiff, their bodies unsure. But slowly with time, they began to remember. The husband said later, "I forgot how natural it felt to just hold her hand." The wife said, "I forgot how much I missed it." That is the beauty of touch. It awakens memory. It reminds us of what has been forgotten but not lost. So if you are listening right now and thinking, "But in my marriage we are too far gone," let me tell you, intimacy through touch is one of the most accessible doorways back to connection. Because even if words are blocked by pride or fear, the body still knows how to communicate. You only need to learn how to listen with your hands, your arms, your presence. And it begins with noticing. Tonight, when you sit next to your partner, instead of keeping a safe distance, close it just slightly. Let your knees touch. When you say goodnight, linger one extra moment in the hug. When you wake up, before reaching for your phone, reach for their hand. These are small, yes, but they are not insignificant. They are the building blocks of intimacy without words. Now, as we move deeper, we will explore how this kind of presence through touch can transform not only your daily interactions, but also your ability to repair conflicts and sustain desire over time. Because when you learn to speak the language of touch, your marriage begins to breathe again without a single word spoken. When we speak about intimacy without words, I want you to imagine it not as a technique but as a practice that you bring into your daily life, the same way you might exercise your body or feed yourself nourishing food. Because intimacy also requires nourishment, and when couples forget to feed intimacy, the relationship begins to starve, even if everything else, finances, routines, responsibilities, appears perfectly in order. So let's talk about how you can reintroduce touch, especially if it feels awkward, distant, or maybe even threatening. Because for some of you watching, the idea of reaching for your partner might feel like stepping into unknown territory, and that's okay. Healing intimacy through touch is not about rushing forward. It's about moving slowly, gently, with curiosity. One of the most powerful exercises I use with couples is what I call intentional touch. This is not about sex. It is not even about romance. It is simply about being present with your partner through the skin. You sit together, maybe on the couch or on the bed, and you place your hand on your partner's arm, or their back, or their hand. You don't move quickly. You don't expect a response. You simply place your hand there, breathe, and notice what happens. The point is not to make something happen. The point is to allow space for connection. Often, in the beginning, people laugh. They feel uncomfortable. They say, "This feels silly." But after a few minutes, the laughter quiets and something shifts. One person notices the warmth of the other's skin. The other notices their own shoulders relaxing. And for a brief moment, they feel safe. That safety is the foundation. Without safety, intimacy is impossible. Touch at its best creates safety. It signals, "You are not alone. I am here." And the body, especially when it has carried stress, anger, or exhaustion, softens in response. This is why even a simple hug has been proven to lower blood pressure and reduce cortisol. Touch literally changes your body chemistry. And when two people share this, they begin to feel like allies again, not adversaries. Now, let's move deeper into how touch can be used to repair conflict. Because conflict is inevitable. Every couple fights. Every couple hurts each other. The difference between couples who survive and couples who collapse is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of repair. And repair is not only about words. It is also about gestures. Imagine this. You've had a fight, voices were raised, you feel misunderstood, your partner feels attacked, hours pass, maybe even days, and now you are lying in bed, your backs turned to each other. This is a dangerous moment, because the longer the silence stretches, the harder it becomes to cross the gap. But what if, instead of waiting for the perfect words, one of you simply reached behind and touched the other's hand? No speech, no justification, just a hand saying, "I still want us." I cannot tell you how many couples have told me that the moment of repair began not with an apology but with a gesture, a touch on the hand, a brush of the back, a forehead against the shoulder. And here's the truth, sometimes words only inflame the wound because you are still defending yourself. But touch, when done with sincerity, communicates vulnerability. It says, "I am willing to lower my armor." And that creates the possibility for reconciliation. Of course, I want to acknowledge something important. For some people, touch has been associated with pressure, with obligation, even with rejection. If one partner has repeatedly reached out and been denied, they may feel afraid to try again. This is why rebuilding intimacy through touch requires agreements. You must both agree, we will start small, we will remove pressure, we will allow touch to be simple, safe, and non-demanding. Start with what I call micro reconnections. When you greet each other after work, hug for more than just a second. Hold each other for 10 seconds, long enough for your bodies to actually sync their breathing. When you leave the house, kiss with presence. Not the quick, distracted peck, but a kiss that lingers just enough to remind you both that love still lives between you. These small acts of intentional touch create a daily rhythm of intimacy. They send a message: we are still connected. Even in the chaos, even in the routine, I choose you. And then there is another level: playful touch. You see, when couples grow older, they often lose not only passion but also playfulness. Everything becomes serious: work, bills, parenting responsibilities. But touch does not have to be solemn. It can also be light, teasing, playful, a gentle tickle, a squeeze of the hand, a playful push while cooking together. These are not trivial. They reintroduce levity into the relationship. They remind both of you that intimacy is not only about solving problems, it is also about joy. One couple I worked with had stopped being affectionate after years of raising children. They told me, it just feels awkward to start again. So I suggested something very simple every morning. When one of them poured coffee, they would place a kiss on the other's cheek. That's it. Just a kiss with the coffee. Within weeks, it became their ritual, and that tiny ritual began to grow. First a kiss, then a hug, then holding hands while walking the dog. Intimacy doesn't return with fireworks. It returns with rituals. Rituals of touch. And let's not forget the erotic dimension, because touch is not only about soothing, it is also about awakening. Many couples come to me saying, our passion is gone. We love each other, but it feels like we're roommates. And often, they try to fix this by talking. Long conversations about why desire has faded, who feels rejected, who feels pressured. These conversations matter, but they rarely rekindle desire on their own. Desire is not logical, it is physical, it lives in the body. And so if you want to bring it back, you must return to the body. That means exploring touch outside of sex, so that touch itself does not feel like a demand. A hand across the lower back, lips brushing the neck, fingers tracing along the arm. These touches are invitations. They awaken the body without insisting on an outcome. And when the body remembers how to feel alive, desire follows. What I want you to understand is that intimacy through touch exists on a spectrum. On one end, it creates safety. On the other end, it creates excitement. And when couples can hold both, when they can soothe each other and also awaken each other, they experience the full richness of intimacy. That is the dance of safety and desire, of closeness and play, of comfort and passion. Now, I know some of you may be thinking, but my partner isn't the touchy type. And yes, some people grew up in families where touch was rare, where affection was expressed through words or acts of service instead. That's okay. You don't have to change who you are. But in a relationship, we grow when we learn each other's languages. If your partner craves touch and you are not used to giving it, start small. Rest your hand on their knee while watching TV. Put your arm around them while walking. You don't need to transform overnight. But remember, growth in love is about stretching, not staying rigid. And for those who feel starved for touch but afraid to ask, I want you to hear this. Your longing is not shameful, it is human. The need for touch is as fundamental as the need for food, for air, for connection. Asking for it is not weakness, it is honesty. And when you give your partner the gift of your honesty, you open the door for them to meet you. So as we continue, I invite you to reflect, where has touch disappeared in your relationship? And where could it be reintroduced gently, without pressure, as a way of saying, I still choose you? Because intimacy without words is not about perfection, it is about returning again and again to presence. And presence begins with the courage to reach out, simply, softly, sincerely. When we think about marriage, we often imagine it as a story written in words, vows exchanged, conversations remembered, arguments repeated. But underneath those words, there exists a quieter narrative, one written in gestures, in presence, in silence. And it is often this unspoken story, the story of touch, that determines whether a marriage flourishes or fades. Touch, when nurtured, becomes like a secret language between two people. A glance across the room, a hand slipped into another's during a moment of uncertainty, the brush of lips before sleep. These things may seem small, but they are the threads that hold the fabric of intimacy together. And yet, when they disappear, it is as if a couple begins to speak in translation. The words are there, but the music is gone. So how do we sustain touch as a language of intimacy over the long course of a marriage? The answer lies not in grand gestures, but in consistency. It lies in choosing, again and again, to remain physically present with your partner, even when life tries to pull you apart. Because life will try. There will be children who demand your energy. There will be careers that consume your time. There will be conflicts, disappointments, betrayals, moments when you feel like turning away. And yet, intimacy survives when in those very moments, you choose to turn toward instead. Turning toward can be as simple as holding your partner's hand under the table at a dinner with friends. It can be pulling them into an embrace after a fight, even before the words of apology are ready. It can be resting your head on their shoulder after a long day, saying without words, I am tired, but I still want you near. These gestures do not erase the challenges of marriage, but they remind both of you that beneath the storms, there is still a bond worth protecting. Let me share a story. I once spoke with a woman who had been married for over 30 years. She told me, we've had our share of fights, even years when we barely spoke. But through it all, every night before bed, my husband would reach over and place his hand on my back. Sometimes I didn't want to talk to him. Sometimes I was angry. But that hand on my back told me, we are still here. It kept me tethered. That is the quiet power of touch. It tethers us, even when words cannot. And it is not only in the moments of conflict that touch matters. It is also in the moments of joy. Touch is how we celebrate each other. The kiss when you share good news, the hug when you see your partner after a long trip, the playful push, the stolen kiss in the kitchen, the laughter that comes when bodies collide in affection. These moments remind us that love is not only about endurance, it is also about delight. Now, I want to speak about something delicate: aging. As couples grow older, their bodies change, energy shifts, desire fluctuates, health challenges may appear. Many couples quietly stop being physically affectionate because they feel self-conscious or because they think intimacy belongs only to the young. But intimacy does not have an expiration date. If anything, touch becomes more important with age, because while words may falter, hearing may weaken, memory may fade, the skin still remembers, the body still responds, and a gentle caress in the later years of marriage can be just as powerful, if not more so, than a passionate embrace in the beginning. So I urge you, do not let the years steal the language of touch from your marriage. Hold hands as you walk, even if your pace is slower now. Kiss each other goodnight, even if the day was uneventful. Rest your head together on the pillow, and let your breathing sink, even if the words no longer come easily. These things matter. They sustain intimacy when everything else grows quiet. And here's the beauty. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment to reintroduce touch. The perfect moment is right now. Tonight, when you see your partner, choose presence. Place a hand on their arm. Kiss them with attention. Hug them for longer than usual. They may be surprised. They may even resist. But over time, these gestures will begin to soften the edges between you. And once the body remembers, the heart often follows. Because intimacy without words is not about fixing everything at once. It is about creating openings. Small openings where connection can re-enter. And when enough of these openings appear, the entire landscape of a marriage can shift. The silence is no longer heavy. The distance is no longer permanent. The marriage breathes again. So, if you take one thing with you from this conversation, let it be this: intimacy is not a feeling you wait for, it is an action you create. You create it when you choose to reach across the divide, not with speeches or explanations, but with your hands, your arms, your presence. You create it when you remember that the most powerful words are sometimes no words at all. And if you are sitting here wondering whether touch can really save a marriage, let me assure you, I have seen it happen. I have seen couples who were on the edge of separation, who had not touched in years, find their way back through the smallest of gestures. It did not happen overnight. It happened one touch at a time, and each touch carried the same message: I still choose you. So tonight, when you go home, when you sit next to your partner, when you crawl into bed, don't just say good night. Touch them, linger, be present, and let your body speak the words that your heart has always known. Because love in its deepest form does not need a script. It needs presence. It needs courage. It needs touch. And maybe, just maybe, that is how you save your marriage, not by saying more, but by saying less and touching more. So here's to you, to your marriage, and to the silent, powerful language of touch. May you never stop speaking it. We've been speaking about the power of touch to repair, to soothe, and to ignite. But let's take a moment to look at something very real, something that plays out quietly in so many marriages: the ways men and women, or more accurately, different partners, often experience touch differently. Because this is where many couples get stuck, not in the absence of love, but in the misunderstanding of how love is expressed and received. For some, touch is the most natural language. They crave it, they reach for it instinctively, they cannot imagine a relationship without it. For others, touch feels more foreign. Perhaps they grew up in a home where affection was rare, where hugs were not given freely, where physical closeness was awkward. And so, when they enter into marriage, they bring that history with them. This difference alone can create a gap. One partner feels starved for affection, while the other feels pressured or uncomfortable. Neither is wrong. They are simply speaking different dialects of love. I often hear from women who say, "Only touches me when he wants sex. I feel like every hug, every kiss is a prelude to something else." And I hear from men who say, "She never initiates. I feel rejected, unwanted, invisible." Do you hear the pain in both voices? The woman craves touch without agenda, touch that makes her feel cherished, not used. The man craves touch as affirmation, a sign that he is still desired. Both are longing for intimacy, but they are caught in a cycle where touch becomes transactional, burdened with expectation instead of free and nurturing. The way out of this cycle is to separate touch from demand. Touch must return to being its own form of intimacy, not only a gateway to sex. When partners begin to experience touch as safe, playful, consistent, it stops feeling loaded. A kiss becomes just a kiss, not a test. A hug becomes just a hug, not a negotiation. And ironically, when touch is freed from pressure, desire often returns naturally because the body feels safe again to respond. Another difference I often notice is how men and women connect emotionally through touch. Many women need to feel emotionally connected in order to open to physical intimacy. They want to feel seen, heard, understood. For them, touch grows out of emotional closeness. Many men, on the other hand, experience the reverse. They often use physical intimacy as a pathway to emotional connection. They feel most open, most loving after touch, not before. So you see the paradox. One says, I need to feel close to want sex, while the other says, I need sex to feel close. And they end up in a stalemate, each waiting for the other to make the first move. But what if, instead of seeing this as a problem, we saw it as a dance between two different rhythms, where each can learn to meet the other halfway? For the partner who craves emotional closeness first, can you allow yourself to sometimes lean into physical connection as a doorway instead of a result? And for the partner who craves physical closeness first, can you create moments of non-sexual touch? Gestures of affection that are not tied to performance, so that intimacy feels safe again. This is not about changing who you are. It is about expanding the ways you can connect. Now let's talk about blocks, because intimacy through touch is not always simple. Many couples carry unspoken blocks, resentment that has built over years, unresolved conflicts, moments of rejection that left scars. You may have reached for your partner once, twice, 100 times, only to feel them stiffen or pull away. And so now you hesitate, you stop reaching. The silence grows, and soon touch feels almost impossible. If that is you, let me tell you, this rejection is painful, yes, but withdrawal is deadly. The marriage cannot survive when both partners live behind walls. Someone must be willing to risk vulnerability again. And vulnerability means reaching even when you are unsure of the response. Because if you wait until every conflict is resolved, until every word is perfectly said, you will be waiting forever. Sometimes the body must move first and the heart follows. But vulnerability also requires agreements. If touch has been fraught in your marriage, sit down and speak openly. Can we try to reintroduce touch without pressure? Can we create a ritual that feels safe for both of us? Maybe it's holding hands for 5 minutes each evening. Maybe it's hugging every morning before leaving the house. Maybe it's lying in bed with your feet touching. Just that. Small, clear agreements remove the fear of rejection because both of you know the boundaries. I want you to remember this: intimacy does not die in one dramatic moment. It dies slowly in the little things you stop doing, the hug that gets shorter, the kiss that disappears, the hand that no longer reaches. And so intimacy can also be revived in the little things you start doing again. Let me share another story. A man once told me that after 25 years of marriage, he and his wife barely touched. They loved each other, but the spark was gone, so he started something small. Every time they walked from the car to the house, he reached for her hand. At first, she seemed surprised, even awkward, but within weeks, she began to reach for his hand first. That tiny act became their ritual, and slowly, other touches followed. He said to me, it felt like we were dating again, just by holding hands. This is what I want you to take with you. Touch is not a luxury, not an extra, not something you do only in the beginning. Touch is the lifeline of intimacy. It is what allows a marriage to stay alive, not only in the good moments, but especially in the hard ones. And so, when you ask yourself, can touch really save my marriage? The answer is yes. Because when words get stuck, when conflicts repeat, when life gets heavy, touch is often the only thing that can break through the silence. It is the gesture that says, I still see you. I still want you. I still choose you. Now, as we begin to draw this conversation to a close, I want to leave you with one final thought. Love is not only a feeling, it is a practice. And touch is one of the most profound practices of love. It requires courage, it requires presence. But when you give it and when you receive it, you create something larger than words. You create a marriage that can breathe, that can bend, that can endure. If you've stayed with me until now, then you already understand something essential. Intimacy without words is not a trick, not a gimmick, not a temporary fix. It is a way of living in your marriage, a way of saying every single day, I choose you again. We began with the question, when was the last time you touched your partner with presence? And perhaps, as you've been listening, you've realized how far away those moments may feel. Or perhaps you've noticed how often you've replaced touch with words, with explanations, with arguments that seem to go in circles. And maybe you've recognized that no matter how much you talk, the distance doesn't close. That's because intimacy is not held together by words alone. It's held together by presence, by gesture, by the subtle ways your body communicates what your mouth cannot. Think of it this way: every time you reach out and place a hand on your partner, you're sending a message that bypasses language. You're speaking directly to their nervous system, telling them you are safe, you are wanted, you are loved. That message is far more powerful than any speech because it is felt, not just heard. And marriages thrive not only on what is heard, but on what is felt. Now, I want you to ask yourself something. If touch could bring your marriage back to life, would you be willing to try? Would you be willing to risk a little awkwardness, a little vulnerability in order to create closeness again? Because make no mistake, touch is a risk. It is the risk of reaching and not knowing if your partner will respond. It is the risk of revealing that you still care, even if you've been hurt before. But what is love? If not the courage to risk vulnerability again and again with the same person? And here's the beauty: intimacy is not rebuilt overnight. It is rebuilt touch by touch, moment by moment, ritual by ritual. Tonight, when you sit beside your partner, resist the urge to fill the silence with words. Instead, let your body speak. Place your hand on theirs. Lean closer. Linger in the hug. Let that be your message. It may not solve everything instantly, but it plants a seed. And when you water that seed with consistency, with presence, with patience, it begins to grow again. I once asked an elderly couple, married for more than 50 years, what kept them together. They looked at each other, smiled, and the husband said, "We never stopped holding hands." Do you see? It wasn't wealth, it wasn't constant romance, it wasn't never fighting, it was the quiet, daily choice to stay connected, skin to skin, palm to palm. A gesture so simple yet so powerful that it carried them through half a century of life together. So maybe saving your marriage doesn't begin with therapy sessions or grand vacations or dramatic declarations. Maybe it begins with something as small as holding hands again. Maybe it begins with remembering that your partner's body is not just familiar but sacred, that their skin is still a home you can return to. And if you've been living in silence, in distance, in the cold space where intimacy used to live, I want you to hear this: it is never too late. The body remembers. The heart remembers. Even if you've been apart emotionally for years, there is always a way back through presence. All it takes is one gesture to begin. So tonight, make the choice. Be the one who reaches first. Don't wait for your partner to make the move. Don't wait for the perfect words. Touch their hand. Kiss their forehead. Place your palm on their back. And if it feels awkward, let it. If it feels vulnerable, good. That's how you know it matters. Because intimacy lives in the places where we allow ourselves to be seen, not only in what we say, but in what we give without words. I want you to imagine your marriage 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Do you want to look back and say, we lived like roommates, side by side, but never connected? Or do you want to look back and say, may not have been perfect, but we never stopped reaching for each other? The choice begins today with one simple touch. So here is my invitation tonight: experiment. Don't announce it. Don't explain it. Just do it. Place a hand on your partner's arm and let it linger. Hug them longer than usual. When you say goodnight, kiss them with presence. And then notice what happens, not in them but in you. Notice how your own body softens, how your own heart opens. Because intimacy is not only about giving, it is also about receiving, about allowing yourself to feel again. And if you find something beautiful in those small gestures, nurture it, protect it, build on it. Because marriages are not saved by grand transformations. They are saved by the quiet, daily acts of connection that remind us we are in this together. So here's to you, to the courage to reach across the silence, to the willingness to risk touch even when it feels scary, to the choice to speak the language of intimacy, not with words but with presence, because love in its truest form has always been spoken through the body. And maybe, just maybe, that is how you save your marriage, not with more talking, not with more analyzing, but with the courage to touch again. So tonight, let your body say what your heart has been holding all along: I still want you, I still see you, I still choose you. And let that be the beginning of everything. Thank you for being here with me. If this spoke to you, share your own story of intimacy in the comments below. Tell me how touch has shaped your marriage, or how you wish it would. And if you want to continue this journey of love, intimacy, and connection, don't forget to subscribe. Because together, we can keep exploring the many ways love speaks, often without a single word. Here's to your marriage. Here's to your love. Here's to the power of touch.